Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time zone you are in. I am really excited to have Adam Riley with me today. He's a civil CAD manager and really great resource to have. He'll be helping in the background with some questions and answers. I am Michelle Rasmussen. I'm the AEC content manager today and at Autodesk. And today I will probably be doing most of the presentation. So I am going to encourage all of you to provide your feedback and jump in with your successes and just really participate a lot in today's session. So today we are going to be talking about some tips and tricks for creating ADA ramps. I know there are many different ways to do this, and so I'm going to show you one way, but I would love to hear what you are doing. So if you're willing, when we get to that, definitely raise your hand. Let's have a live conversation and share your successes with the entire audience. I think everyone can gain a lot when we do that. So while we're giving everyone a minute to join, I would love for you to type in the question and answer panel where you are coming in from. So if you would, just go and type in where you are in the world, and we'll keep an eye on that while we're waiting for people. So I see Trisha from Michigan, Elizabeth from Pennsylvania, Care, whoops, it's going too fast. I'm gonna have to slow it down. Let's see. Okay, Kier from Chicago, Teresa from Virginia, Laura from North Carolina, Ian from England, great to have you. Brian from New Jersey, Randy from California, Michael from Washington, Vivek from Dubai, very nice to have you. It's got to be pretty late where you are. Catherine from Colorado, Neil from Edinburgh in the UK, Lillian from California, Elizabeth from New Jersey. I won't be able to get through all of these. Thank you all so much. I love to see where everyone is coming in from, and I love to see that global audience joining us. Hopefully very soon we'll be able to do a lot more with the global audience and provide this in your own language, but no promises, but that is something I would like to work toward. So Mary from Ontario, nice to have you with us. And I think the numbers are starting to level off a little bit, so we'll go ahead and get started. Just a quick little safe harbor statement. I won't read through the whole thing with you, but you're welcome to read it yourself. Basically, it just says, hey, if I do make any forward-facing statements, then, don't use those forward-facing statements as a reason to buy software from Autodesk. Although we try to get all of your wish list items into the software and we are working towards that, it's never a full promise that we'll be able to make the software do what we want it to do all the time. And so, again, don't make any purchasing decisions based on anything I might say today. Just for a couple of items of business, the lines are muted. That's simply to reduce background noise because we are recording this, and the recording will be sent out after the session. It will be emailed to everybody who registered. So if your coworkers or friends or family or whoever wanted to join this weren't able to, they'll be able to watch that recording later on. If I do, however, encourage a lot of participation. So what will happen is I'll keep an eye on the attendee panel. If you have a question, you're brave enough to ask that live, go ahead and raise your hand in that attendee panel. I will open up your line and unmute you, and we'll have a little conversation back and forth. If you would prefer to put your questions in the Q&A panel, that's always safe, because if we don't get to all of the questions, we'll come back and try to answer those in the forum after the fact. And so I've put the forum link in the slide deck as well as in the chat panel. If you, for some reason, cannot see that chat panel, though, let me know in the Q&A panel, and I'll make sure I transfer that link over to the Q&A panel for you. Excuse me, I've got hiccups. Okay, and so these are all of the different meetups that we have available, most of them being AEC. The electrical engineering and mechanical engineering, though, those two are for our design and manufacturing folks. If you are an electrical engineer that works on buildings or a mechanical engineer that works on buildings, the building engineer meetup is the one that you should be most interested in, or someone from your firm that does that kind of work. Those are the ones that they'd be most interested in. But again, today we are going to talk about ADA ramps. So I am going to open up the questions to you. Let me start a poll, because I would like to know how many of you are addressing ADA ramps and how are you addressing them? So the poll should now be open. If you're not doing anything with ADA ramps, let me know that. Just say, no, we're not doing anything. If you're using 2D blocks, great. If you're using feature lines to make that grading happen, or corridors, or maybe you have some other method that I haven't even thought of yet. So I'd love to hear what you're doing. I see a few of you are saying that you're not addressing them. I am always curious to find out why people don't address them. You know, with ADA ramps, it's extremely important to make sure that the flow of water on site is. Oh, okay. So I'm seeing a question in the Q&A panel. Neil asks, can you clarify what an ADA ramp is? So an ADA ramp is wheelchair access, basically, so that someone doesn't have to go off of a curb, you know, that 6-inch curb or whatever, to go across the road or the parking lot. It gives them a nice, smooth transition from sidewalk to asphalt to help them move around a little bit easier on site. Obviously, like, you don't want a really steep ramp, because that ramp would, you know, have that wheelchair go way too fast down. And so it's that ADA ramp style that, according to government standards, that makes sure that it's a safe way to go from sidewalk to asphalt, or from asphalt to building, or, you know, wherever it might end up being. Yes, Bob, you're correct. Sometimes we call it a curb ramp. Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm curious, Neil, to know what you might call it in the UK. So great. Okay, so I see 70% have voted at this point, and it looks like most of you are using feature lines. I'll give you about 10 more seconds, and then we will close the poll. And Catherine is saying we usually use generic design placeholders as a caveat. Okay, great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. 74% of you did vote, and I'm going to share that voting with you so that you can see it. I would love to know, for those 13% that say you are not doing anything with your ADA ramps, are you willing to speak up and say, you know, how are you handling it? How are you getting approvals? Are you even worried about that? Is there anyone willing to raise their hand and have a conversation with that? Okay, so Mary is saying they use standard drawings for construction. And she's also saying we have few issues when it comes to site. Okay, great. Excellent. And let me okay, well, great. And so it looks like most of you are using feature lines. Some of you are using corridors. Now, Adam, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here. You had mentioned that you use corridors for your ADA ramps. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you handle your ADA ramps with corridors?
Primarily, when I'm doing corridors, it's for the curb for a parking lot and maybe for the sidewalk. But when I'm doing the ramps, I will create a normal curb section assembly for all my curbs, and then create a little ribbon curb assembly for the transition along the gutter line. And I'll just leave a little gap in my corridor that'll pull the feature lines from the normal curb section down to the ribbon curb section, and then back up as it goes through the ramp. And it works out really well for just modeling it for the surface. Have to get a little more detailed if I want to actually show the pavement in my corridor though.
Okay, great. That sounds great. Yeah, I found a lot of people who don't worry about the ADA ramps. They're more residential sometimes, but even now, like even to get a subdivision approved, most of the municipalities make sure that you're setting those ADA ramps and showing where they are. And if you don't create your surface to accommodate for that ADA ramp, um, you might end up with some drainage issues, and that's the last thing that we want. We don't want to have water piling up right at that ramp because, you know, here in Utah especially, we freeze. You know, it gets below 30 quite a bit in the winter, and I should say 30 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius. And so when it goes below freezing, that ramp would freeze and it would create, you know, too slick of a surface for the wheelchairs, and then there's no point in even having that ramp if it's all frozen. So I always recommend that you do include those ADA ramps. And so let's take a look at a few of the types of ramps, or the specifications for the ramps. So these are the US standards, and I put a link to the guidelines that you see here, where I pulled those guidelines from so that you can access those. But basically, you know, for that transition that we see over here, transitioning from the sidewalk down to the ramp, there's always a 36-inch minimum platform that you need to have there, or not triangle, square that you need to have to allow for that transition. And then a 12% maximum slope and a 10%, or not 12%, a 1 to 12 max slope and a 1 to 10 max slope for the wing walls, so the flares, the side flares. So it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of exactly, you know, the design parameters that we need to stay within. And so today I'm going to show you how I personally would handle these. You know, we looked at, you know, in that poll, we noticed that we can use blocks to show them in 2D. We can use feature lines to create that. We can use corridors. And I am curious, I want to bring that conversation back to those that are using other methods. But let's jump into the software and actually take a look at how we might go about designing this ramp. And I know every state might have their own variation of these standards, but this is the US government standard to follow. Not all sidewalks can be, you know, 9 feet wide, which is what this might entail if we were to follow this. So, and of course, when you're working with ADA ramps, sometimes you need them at both cross sections, so, or both street crossings, I should say. And so you might have to accommodate both of those. And sometimes we need a little bit more of a flat surface for drainage reasons at the bottom of the ramp. So there's a lot of different things that you need to worry about, a lot of different things that we'll take a look at. But for the most part for today, I'm going to simply have a 12% max slope and then a 10, or not percent, a 1 to 12 max slope, and then a 1 to 10 max slope on the flares. So let me go ahead and jump out of there and jump into the software. So what I have is I've got a site where we've got this building, and this green line represents the building itself. And then these two lines, actually there's 3 there, you can't see it very well. That's basically from the building, edge of the building out, that's a sidewalk, okay? And then I'm going to pretend that my ADA ramp needs to come off of here so that they can cross the parking area, this drive area, and get to these parking spaces that would probably have some handicap symbols in them, so that that's our handicap parking. And then once I have this first ramp done, I'm going to have another one so that they can get to this. So maybe there's 2 doors here on the building, one at this point going straight out, one at this point going straight out to get to those ADA parking spots, those handicap parking spots. All right, so now that you have kind of an idea of what I have here, let's take a look at what surfaces I have, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a combination of feature lines and grading objects. And the reason I'm going to do that is the feature lines get me the ramp itself, but then I allow from the ramp out to go using a grading object to grade back up to the sidewalk. If I do it properly, I can then make copies of that grading group with the feature line, the grading objects, everything, and copy that around the site and rotate it and move it around so that I don't have to recreate it every single time, which I'm assuming a lot of you might do. And so we want to avoid that as much as possible. That's why we have CAD. You know, it automates a lot of those tasks. It reduces the amount of repetitive things you need to do. So here is my little square. That's my transition point. So, you know, the nice thing is this one, we're coming straight out the door and then going down the ramp. So I don't necessarily need that, but what if they came in from this access over here and came up the sidewalk and then had to transition and go down to there? Easy enough, right? And so I am going to leave that square in there. That's a 3-foot square just for that transition point that we saw in our standard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that into a feature line. And you can see I have over here, I have a sidewalk surface, and then I have this FG rough surface. Now, the reason I create that, when I'm going around and copying these grading groups around the site to create all of the different ramps that I might possibly need, I want to make sure that it uses the same surface to daylight so that I don't have to modify that on the fly. So I will always start with my existing ground, go ahead and add all my site grading, you know, the parking lot grading, the corridors, everything in there, and I'll call it my FG rough surface. And then once I start to create all those ADA ramps and I have those surfaces all created, I'll actually create a final grade surface that would be more finite. So including those ramps to make sure that I can check runoff and triangles and everything looks great. Okay, so that's what I have. So I have my sidewalk going around the building and I have that FG rough surface, and I'll quickly show you what's in that surface. You can see, let me drag this up a little bit more. I've pasted 2 surfaces in. I've got my FG inside and my FG entrance road. What else I need to do is I need to add that sidewalk surface to it. So for those of you that haven't done this before, combining surfaces, I'm simply going to right click on my edits, paste a surface, and where did you end up? I'm not seeing it on either of my, see, there's external references. Oh, there it is. Okay, dialog box went to my other screen, so sorry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this surface and click OK. And now when I daylight up to that FG rough surface, it's going to daylight up to the sidewalk without creating a circular reference, okay? All right, so the next thing I'll do is I'll turn this piece into a feature line. So I'm going to create a feature line from objects, selecting that object and hitting enter. And again, my dialog box went to the other screen. Let me, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hopefully turn off, I'm going to turn off my video because that seems to be getting in the way. There it is. Okay. It keeps hiding my dialog boxes. All right, so I'm going to put it on the sidewalk site. That looks good. I will let it take the basic feature line style. And I am going to assign elevations and erase the existing entity. There's no need for that entity to be there anymore. It's a good way to clean up the drawing quickly. So I'm going to select that. And another dialog box is not appearing. Let me go find where that went. There it is. Too many things open. All right, so I'm going to have it assign elevations from the sidewalk so that it ends up at the right elevation for the sidewalk. That looks great. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and add some more feature lines. Now, I know that my sidewalk is 6 inches deep, and I have basically 6 feet from this point out to the edge of my sidewalk. So I'll be able to do a nice easy 12% or 1 to 12 slope on it. And so I'll go feature line. I'll create a feature line from scratch, and the sidewalk sites is perfect. I always want to make sure that I'm putting everything for my grading group in the same site. That's very important because if they're not in the same site, they won't communicate with each other. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. I'll click OK. And now I will pick a point on there. And you can see that since I used the elevations from the sidewalk to create that feature line of the the transition point, it already has the elevations assigned for that first point. I'm going to let it take that because that's exactly what I wanted it to do. And then I'm going to just push my cursor in the direction I want it to go, type in 6 for 6 feet, and you can see it went ahead and finished out straight along that line. Now it's saying, well, what elevation do you want to go to? Well, I'm going to do a difference in elevation. So the elevation or difference, or I could have done the slope, the grade, elevation, surface, or transition. But I'm going to type in a negative 0.5. So it goes down that 6 inches down to the flow line of the curb. And that looks pretty good. So I just hit enter to get out of the command. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side so that my ramp goes on the other side as well. So I'll do a feature line, create the feature line. Again, same site, style, that looks good. And I'll select from the endpoint there. Again, it took the sidewalk elevation. That looks perfect. I'll hit enter and make sure I'm going in the right direction, go out 6 feet. And the difference is going to be negative 0.5 again. Okay, so now I have my ramp, I have my transition platform, I have my ramp. Now I just need to add those wing walls. Now I know a lot of you that are using feature lines to do this, you'll actually come out and draw in those wing lines, but I'm going to let the software do that for me so that the wing line ends up just right. So to do that, I'm going to go in and create a grading group, and I'm going to use the grading creation tools to do that. So if you haven't used these before, they're amazing. I love using my tools. I'm going to start by naming the group. So I always start in these little toolbars, left to right. That's my little trick to make sure I don't miss any steps. So I'll choose to select the grading group. It is going to be in the sidewalk site. And you can see I don't have any grading groups in here yet. So I'm going to create a new one. And apologize, this is what happens when you use 2 monitors, right? Move everything back to the right monitor. So I'm going to call this my ramp for my grading group. And I'll have it create a surface for me automatically using the name of the group for the surface name. Okay, this will allow me later on to add that surface to my finite finished ground surface that includes all of the triangles that we'd possibly need. Okay, so I'll click OK, and it's going to ask me to create that surface. It's automatically given it the name ramp because that was the name for my group. I'll click OK, and I'll click OK one more time to bring me back to my grading tools. So I have the group named now. The next thing I need to do, because I am going to grade to a surface, I need to tell it what surface to grade to. So the next option is to go ahead and choose the target surface. And you'll see I have plenty of surfaces in my model. I am going to grade to the FG rough. Again, the reason for that, if I copy this grading group anywhere on my site, as long as it's within that surface, those daylights will find their way out, and then you can make adjustments to those feature lines as necessary to make the proper grade of those wing walls. So I'm going to choose FG Rough, click OK. And you can see because of the types of gradings I have set up in my tools, I have grade to distance, elevation, relative elevation, surface, and a standard. I am going to grade to the surface, and now I'm ready to go ahead and click the grading. So I'll create grading. I'll select the feature line, pick the side to grade to. So I'm going to have my wall be on that that left side. Yes, I will go to the entire length. And do I want to do it to a grade or a slope? Well, my slope is that 1 to 10, right? So I'm going to do slope, and I'm going to type in 10 in there. It assumes to 1, so you just have to type in that run, all right? So it assumes that the 1 rise, and so we'll type that. And I'm going to do that. So it adds the cut slope and the fill slope, just in case it might turn into a cut situation or a fill situation. So we're going to go ahead and do the fill slope as well at a 10 and click OK. Voila. It went ahead and created that wing for me automatically according to where my ramp is and the sidewalk depth. So I'll do the same on this side, pick a point. Yes, I want to go over the entire length again, slope. It's going to take the last slope that I use, so I'm just going to click enter through the rest of these, and it's done. How easy was that? All right, so now I can just hit escape, and I have my nice little ramp. There's no need to do anything else. That was pretty quick and easy, wasn't it? Now, I did say that I want this in a couple different spots, so I'm going to take and copy this. Let me start the copy command, and this is just the regular copy command. I can do that with feature lines and grading groups and things. So I'm going to select that, hit the enter key, and I'll just go ahead and pick that point right there. Let's go. I'm just going to, my mouse is being really slow. Sorry about this. All right, there we go. I need a new mouse pad is what I need. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I line up with this set of parking spaces and that I am somewhere on that sidewalk or along that building. So I'm going to use the nearest command to pick a point right there. And now I have 2 ramps. My wing walls are created. Everything looks great. It looks like my sidewalk did get a little bit off, so I'm going to rebuild that. And you can see it's easy to make that copy. And if I were to go out and, oops, that graded to 0. Oh, I bet I selected, I did a nearest command and I went to the nearest. But you know what? It's really easy to modify that. I can just take these lines and let's see, where is my feature line? There we go. Okay, so right, oh, I guess I've got to do one at a time here. So I can select the feature line and tell it, hey, let's fix this. Let's move that up or down. And so I can do it in the elevation editor. I can do it using any of the feature line commands. And let me move that elevation editor up. So you can see what happened. I used that nearest command and it picked the nearest to the line that was at elevation 0. So we can fix that easily though. I'm going to just go ahead and tell it to bring it up to the surface and tell it to bring it up to the sidewalk surface and click OK. That will take care of that first piece. But I also need to update this other feature line. So let's let go of that. There we go. And so I can, and so these are the mistakes you don't want to make, right? Make sure you don't grab, move that around to elevation 0. But you can see I can bring that up. In fact, you can see where, in fact, let me zoom in on this so that you can see it better. Okay, so when I select my elevation editor, I love my elevation editor because it shows me where things are at. So this point right here, I can tell it to come back up to the sidewalk. That looks much better. And why did it not go up to the sidewalk though? I'm going to have to investigate that. Maybe let's type it in. It was about 58:35, I believe, maybe. Yep, that took that time. Okay, so that overrode it. But I'm going to select this point. Oh, that's going to be the wrong point. It's stuck on. Let's go ahead and do this and elevation editor. There we go. That looks better. Okay, so we can see that is up to 29.25, and you can't see it very well, but it is this first point. So that whenever you draw your feature lines, the first station is the first point you pick. So that was being the first one I picked. I can go ahead and select this, tell it to go up to the surface, a sidewalk, and it's gone to a relative elevation, so it's going to stay at that negative 0.5. Anyway, oh, you know what? It's not updating. What is on Rebuild Automatic? Anyway, but you can see, you can do some modifications there. Again, if I wanted to make it even easier on myself, I could go ahead and undo what I did and just make sure I don't use that nearest command again. So let's open it up to questions, though. I think you've seen me, yep, just undo. That's exactly right, Anne. Okay, so let's open it up to questions. Do we have people asking questions? Let me pull up my attendee panel. Yes, I have Michael. Michael, I'm going to open up your line. And you are unmuted. If you're able to unmute yourself on your side, Michael, I'd love to have that conversation a little bit back and forth. Not able to unmute? Let me see if I've got you in here twice. Maybe you're on a phone line as well. Let me see. No, you're not in here twice that I can see. Okay, so Michael, sorry that we're not able to unmute you since you're muted on your side. Let's go to the next question. Let's see, let's go to the Q&A panel. Okay, so Kieran is saying it's too fiddly. Let's see. Okay, Ian is saying for the UK, it's Part M compliant ramp for the UK. That's what you would describe these as. Great, thanks for answering that. Let's see. I have a lot of comments about the UK, what they're calling it in the UK and other parts of the world, so thank you. Okay, so John asked the question, how do you approach annotations of these ramps for construction documents? Great question. So let's jump over and take a look at how I might go around and fix this. So let me do some quick undos really fast. I'll undo back to my copy command. It's another thing I love, that undo, being able to do a bunch of them all at once. Oops, did I undo too much? My lines disappeared there. Okay, but we should have a surface in here, and let me just rebuild that really quick. That's a bother that undo went back to that far. But let's just see. So let's go to our ramp. I'm going to select the ramp over here in the tool space. I'll right click and choose select. And what that does for me is it brings up my tin surface tools, so my ribbon. And I'll just choose to add some labels, and I can add slope labels, elevation labels, whatever I want in here. I will add my slope label, and I'll just do a 1-point slope and pick a point about right there, and then pick a point about right there. And you can see that's a 13% slope according to, going from where that ramp was up to the sidewalk surface. And so if I needed to change that, no problem. I can go and adjust either the feature line or the slope of my grading object. My cursor has disappeared. Let me hit escape. There we go. Okay. So if I don't like the size of that, this is all in the standards that you use. In fact, I can select that label, right click on it, and go and edit the label style. So here, rather than using a % slope, I can tell it to use my run over rise or rise over run, or whatever combination of slope items we want. And that will show me that's a 7.1 or 7.7 to 1 slope. So that stayed within my max slopes. That was the 10%, so that's perfect. And I could do the same thing with this label. Obviously, you want to set your standards up so that you have exactly the right size arrows, exactly the right size text, and the default style that you want to use every time. So obviously I wouldn't want this to default to the RS% when I use that slope option. I would want to use something more like this. Okay, so that's how I go about describing those. Obviously something happened when I undid everything. It got rid of my feature lines, but I would actually leave those in there so that people can see, where my transition square is, where the ramp is, and then where the wings flare out. So great question. Oh, yep, actually, you're right, Ezra. Okay, you're right. So yeah, 7.1 to 1, we would need to adjust that. So, I can change that simply by selecting that grading group, right-clicking and going into the grading editor and adjusting the slope there. Or I can adjust by, if I could see my feature line there, I could adjust the slope of that as well. Okay, let's go to another question here. Okay, so Kieran is saying that his answer was the bit about too fiddly on the questions was that he feels like it's too doing ramps in Civil 3D is too fiddly. So there's it's nothing to do with the workflow. Well, thank you, Kieran. I appreciate that. So I would love to open it up. So Michael, I see that you are you have your hand raised again. I'm going to open it up to your line. And are you able to unmute yourself? Because it is saying that you're self-muted at this point. So Michael Paul, I have unmuted you. Not opening? Okay. So Adam, let's bring it to you. What do you do when you are working with your corridors? Maybe walk us through verbally how you go about making sure your corridors, when things change, how do you handle that?
In what way do you mean for how do they change? Like if the corridor itself or the ramp?
So yeah, so if the municipality or government agency, whoever's approving your plans, if they see that the ramp that you put in isn't, maybe there's water collecting at it, or whatever might need to happen to make that ramp safer, and they say, hey, make these changes instead of a 10-to-1 slope, let's go to a 12-to-1 slope on those wings. What would you do to accommodate that change? How do you handle that?
It's a good question. We built all of our ramps pretty much the same, and we haven't really had many people comment on them. Where we do a standard 5-foot width for the flare, which gives us a nice 12-to-1 slope. The only thing we ever really have to worry about is making sure the cross slope from one end of the flare to the other end of the flare doesn't throw them out of compliance. We spend a little bit more time in grading for ADA than the rest of it, so it kind of helps keep down comments and issues in construction.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a little time consuming doing them with corridors, and so when we do them, we try do them right the first time so that we don't have to change them. If we have to make changes, we end up removing it completely and then just re-adding it.
Okay. And that's not too hard to do. I mean, since with corridors, you can just replace the assembly that's used at that point. So that is a great way to handle it. I'm curious for someone else maybe that uses feature lines, if you're willing to, verbally explain how you use feature lines. Let's have a conversation about these. Maybe just raise your hand in the Q&A in the attendee panel so that I'll know that you're willing to, share your best practices when it comes to ADA ramps. Oh, there we go. Okay, so Nick, I'm so glad you're on. So Nick Major is from AWA. And Nick, I have unmuted you on my side. It looks like you're still self-muted.
Can you hear me, Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, so when we do accessible ramps, we actually do it several different ways. Depends on what type of ramp we are working with. The style that you're using, that you're showing on your display right now, that can be accomplished with either corridors or feature lines. When we do it with feature lines, the curve itself may be drawn with a feature grading group, similar to what you've done, but we will draw the ramp itself and the wing walls as a solid feature line, which will control the slope on the ramp itself. So the 10-to-1 slope or the 12-to-1 slope, we could access that basically by using just a feature line. From that, we are allowed to control the cross slope and the running slope of both directions of the ramp itself. And then with a corridor, we have also created sections and leaving some out, just as I believe Adam has said. We do that same idea, but instead of we will actually add the concrete ramp to the corridor assembly along with the bottom of the curb, which will allow the slope of the curb to match the feature line of the asphalt, we'll say. So we're building corridors off of the feature lines rather than an alignment.
Great.
And by doing that, we're minimizing time that we're spending on each one, and it's moving pretty smoothly through the design of the ramps themselves. And they are dynamic, the way that we build them with the grading groups, as if your asphalt slope changes, the ramp will follow it as well.
Awesome. So you are using some of a combination of feature line and grading group?
Feature line, grading groups, and corridors, depends on which ramp it is, yes.
Okay. And I'm curious, so for that entry level drafter that picks up a project like this, do you train them on just using the assemblies that you've used, or do you train them on how to create their own assemblies for those corridor models so that they can make adjustments according to, whatever new standard the project might call for?
So we will have a basic assemblies and assembly libraries that we've provided. And each one of those we can bring in and allow newer people to use until they feel more comfortable moving forward and learning how to adjust corridor assemblies and how they work that way.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Nick, for being willing. So Nick and I have worked a little bit together through AWA Engineering, and he is one of the top-notch drafters there, designers. And so thank you, Nick, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Is anyone else willing? Is there another method that someone is using that you're willing to share with the crowd here? Michael, I'm going to try unmuting you again because I still see your hand raised, but for some reason I'm not able to hear you. Are you able to unmute yourself yet, Michael Pohl? Okay. All right, so let's go back over to the Q&A panel then. Let's see, John says, I am wondering how many people here design retrofit ramps for street improvements. In our yearly paving project in our small municipality, where we may construct up to 80 ramps every year, we find it difficult to spend time modeling all terrain at each intersection that would allow to the design process like you describe. I'm sure we would benefit from it, particularly because we live in a mountainous region. Yep, just like in Utah. But with limited resources, we're looking for a more lean process if possible. Though not as lean as just on-site layout. Okay, that is a fabulous question. And John, I'm curious, I'm going to open up your line because I am curious to find out if you are using survey equipment. How are you capturing those existing conditions? Because there's some great ways that we can automate some of that capture, automate the drafting of some of the existing conditions to help you utilize the functionality that I used here. So let me find you. All right, so John, I have unmuted your line.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine today. How are you?
I'm great, great. Thank you for being willing to talk to us live. I really appreciate that. So tell me a little bit more, how are you collecting that existing conditions data and then creating your site?
Well, to be honest, we have primarily not gathered existing conditions data. Recently, we have tried to step up our game and do a little bit more actual pre-construction design. So right now, the approach that we're taking is we have relatively high quality LiDAR that has been gathered in most of our municipality by a nearby educational institution. And we can use that to model surfaces where it has been gathered. But it was not collected for this particular purpose. If we have time, we're able to go out with actual survey equipment, you know, and gather points along a curb line, along an existing curb line. But essentially, yeah, we do not have a great process right now in place for the number of ramps that we have to deal with. So unfortunately, we are mostly doing a final layout on site with certain constraints and specifying typical ramps that you might find. But we have some roadways with 30% grade, many with 10% or more grade. And so a significant number of technical infeasibilities for certainly flares and even ramp slopes. So, but you know, I imagine that a more stringent and more formal design process would allow us to get better results, even if not totally compliant. So
yeah. I mean, I think even just going out, if you know, if you don't have the GPS survey equipment, even a total station would help you at least grab you know, the existing conditions better. And next month at our civil engineering meetup, we'll be talking about how to bring that survey data in so that automates creating that line work for you. So, you know, as you capture it in the field, if you go and capture all the top backs of curbs and then all the flow lines, and since you're focusing specifically on the ADA ramps, you know, grabbing where that flare starts and ends and where the ramp is and everything, you could have it automate all of that line work so that when you bring that into the model, it draws all that line work and you can create your surface from it and then have a nice surface to work with to start adjusting it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. I'm so glad that you joined us today. It's always a pleasure to hear what everyone is doing with the software so that we can, you know, help you do it better. One of the comments that came in that from Ezra is the 7.7 to 1 is greater than a 10 to 1. That may or may not be out of spec according to the standard. So if the standard measures that slope for the wings of the ramp parallel to the sidewalk, then we are absolutely within scope, because that is how that grading object was built, is parallel to the sidewalk coming out from there. So great. Okay, so Kieran is saying he has not tried this yet with 2020 using the country kit. Has been, let's see, let me back up. Okay, so the country kit has been overhauled to allow UK users to model ramps within a corridor. Oh, that's awesome. I wasn't aware of that. I believe that the UKIE curbs now cater to varying height. Sorry, I would raise my hand, but the headset has been commandeered by my 6-year-old. I love that. I love that it's been commandeered. Awesome. So yeah, I was unaware, since I'm not in the UK, I don't even think about the country kits to use those, but that's amazing to hear that that has been incorporated into the corridors. Awesome. Okay, Michelle is asking the question, is there a place that Autodesk stores files that we can play with, like a sandbox? Absolutely. Let me introduce you. Let's see, so the rest of her question, she would like to use those, and I do not do grading, but instead of but interested in learning it. So I love it. So we do have, let me jump into our customer success learning hub. So let me show you this. So if you go to customersuccess.autodesk.com, this is a connected learning experience that we've created that connects what people are doing in different aspects of the project. So for our architect, you know, what are they doing during the existing additions part? How do they coordinate and share their work with others, conceptual design? And then same thing for the civil engineer. What are they doing for that existing condition? So it plays the connection between all of these different disciplines. And the way we've designed this is it's all using the same project if we can. A couple of the courses in here, we've used different projects, but every one of the projects has a data set with it. And in fact, the data set that I was using came from one of the files from this conceptual design piece. And so if you go in here and you say, well, I want to learn a little bit more about storm drain design in Civil 3D, I can select that course. And as long as I'm signed in, it will go ahead and open the course up, and it comes in and it tells you, you know, this one will take approximately 30 minutes to get through. Here are the things that you'll be able to do by the end. If you don't have the software, you can go and load it from the free trials. You can reach out to product support if you have any problems loading it. And we do have our forums connected as well. And the nice thing about this is each one of these is connected to a specific forum so that other people taking the same course, you can ask each other questions and, you know, get support that way from each other, because when we support each other, we support ourselves. But every course starts with a video, how to do it, and then it goes into an exercise. Most of the time, the files are right up here at the top. Sometimes if the file is too large, you may have to look for a link right here in the data, the exercise itself. But it should walk you through exactly how to do it using the data set that is provided. So you can definitely, Michelle, go out and use those files anytime you want to try out so that you don't mess up your own projects. I love that question. Thank you. All right, so John is asking the question, I'm supposing if we were to use Total Station to collect points and lines, it would be helpful to understand in general the minimum required to perform a reasonable design. Absolutely. And so I assume enough to model the curb line, existing intersection slopes, and then specific constraints such as the building entrances and or other untouchable monuments. Yeah, so John, I would definitely work with, at least initially, talk with a licensed surveyor to help you get started, because they can help you understand exactly what points to collect as you're collecting that survey. For me, when I would go out surveying, I did surveying both in the military and then for a couple of different engineering firms when I got out of the military. And I would always make sure I capture the top back of the curb, the flow line of the curb, and where the curb meets the asphalt. And so those are the three key lines that I would capture for the sidewalk. And then obviously the front of the curb, or where the curb catches the building, depending on how far away that sidewalk is from the building. But I'd catch front of walk, back of walk, top back of curb, flow line, and edge of asphalt. So those are the key things that you would collect. And then from that, it gives you all of those break lines for the surface that you might need, so that it can create a good triangulation of those points and create a good surface. Great question, John. All right, Oscar asked the question, how can we add these certificates to LinkedIn profile? Okay, so right now we don't have a connection with LinkedIn to provide the certificates to connect with your LinkedIn profile. What we can do is provide you a certificate of completion for attending. And Oscar, I can make sure I get that to you. It is a little bit of a different process. What happens when we provide those certificates is you have to, we provide your email system to, or your email to the system that we use, and that will send you an email asking you to, I think it asks you to register for the course, but you've already taken it. So just click on the link and it will have you fill out an evaluation for attending this, and then provide you with that certificate of completion. The courses themselves here in the Connected Learning experience, you get a certificate of completion for completing the course, and you just download that. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to connect that, like I said, to the LinkedIn profile. So with that, we are right at the top of the hour. Adam, I want to thank you for helping with these questions in the background. I really appreciate that. I noticed he's put in some links to different things that you can go out and to answer some of the questions that came in. So thank you very much, Adam, for that. And I want to thank all of you for joining. I know it's a lot to take time away from your jobs when you're mostly billable. And so hopefully you learned a little bit from this. If you have additional questions, let's definitely put those in that forum. And so let me see if I can go and make sure you can see that. There we go. So this is the forum. It's just, tips and tricks on ADA ramps. Like I said, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it will make you more efficient. And if you have more tips to share that you think will help everyone, definitely add those here, because this is the community where I want you to, help each other and grow together so that we can all create a better world as we design. Well, thank you all for joining, and I hope to see you next month. Take care, everyone.